This is the Aston Martin Heritage Podcast with Gary Taylor.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Aston Martin Heritage Podcast. My name is Gary Taylor. With a record-breaking 702 Aston Martins, the 31st of August Aston Martin Heritage Festival was the best yet. Celebrating 90 years of the Ulster and the MKII, together with 30 years of the DB7, the 2,000 plus visitors witnessed the Aston Martin Heritage Trust aim to share the heritage, the passion of Aston Martin via the cars, the people and the stories. With this year's innovation of a professional stage and a huge diamond screen, such stories could be seen and heard throughout the British Motor Museum arena, with several prominent personnel from AML's past. In the first of a series of interview recordings from the festival, we are delighted to introduce Dr. Betts on the stage. He was chairman and CEO at Aston Martin Lagonda from July 2000 to February 2014. During that period, a new factory opened in 2003 at Gaydon, which is still the AML HQ, and it also incorporated the first Aston Martin design studio. During his period, he introduced the DB9 and the V8 Vantage, and throughout generated and produced 50,000 vehicles, if not more. With expert motoring historian and professional presenter Wayne Scott as the main host, we hear what Dr. Betts thought of Aston Martin while he was at Porsche and BMW, his early days at Bloxham, dealing with strikes, the relationship with Ford, AML becoming independent, motor racing and much more. He also gives his views on electric vehicles and a possible hydrogen-powered future. This enthralling conversation was booked originally for 30 minutes but went on for 45 minutes because it was so fascinating to hear his stories. So if you're there, want a reminder, or you missed the festival and you want to listen to it, this podcast relives that conversation. I hope you enjoy it.
My next guest was the Chief Executive Officer, the CEO between 2000 and 2013. He was also chairman of Aston Martin. And during his 13 years in that role, over 50,000 cars were produced. And that was more than 3 times what the company had previously sold from 1913 until 2000 when he started. And during his tenure, he developed over 20 major new models. Please welcome to the stage, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Ulrich Betts. Well, firstly, Dr. Ulrich, welcome to the salubrious surroundings of the British Motor Museum. Have you had a chance to look at some of the cars that are in the museum there today?
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. It's a great pleasure and a big surprise that this is such a big event, and I could see so many of smiling faces owning an Aston Martin. So, of course, I have a short look around and I've seen at least some faces I know, but it's really, really good, and it's very nice English weather. So.
It's perfect, isn't it? Not too hot, because we complain when it gets too hot, and nice and dry for the rest of today as well. I want to take you back, Dr. Ulrich, if I can, to the very beginning of your career in motoring. You were very motorsport focused. You were working for Porsche, and tell us how you saved the 911, because this is a kind of precedent that you've set throughout your career, saving things, turning new leaves and forging the future. You are responsible for saving the 911, aren't you?
Yes. I started my automotive life with Porsche. I learned there. I was on a working bench with apprentices and all, and later I made my diploma work with Porsche, and I was hired with Porsche. So I worked then 10 years in various jobs and could cover transmission, suspension, bodywork, engine, and learn a lot of those things. So all my basic understanding comes from Porsche, I have to say this. Well, with this success, I went to BMW because I thought Porsche is not everything in the world. I need to see more in the automotive world. And BMW was, for me, the next step. In BMW, they also found out that I might be a little bit an entrepreneur, somebody who wants to go in the future, do something else. So they asked me if I would create a BMW GmbH giving me 10 million mark at this time a year. No target, no nothing, said just come back in a year and tell us what you have done. Of course, expecting that it would be something. And out of this work, there was the BMW Z1. This was a car which was not officially brought to England, but this was this little spider with the sliding doors where you could drive through the country, doors down, and really enjoy life.
It was a car with a party trick, wasn't it?
It was, yeah, because going in and out was a nice thing, especially if you have a girlfriend or, so anyway, it was a great success. Finally, there were 8,000 cars built, and some of them are even here in England, because I know English people are also very much interested in things like this. And from this, I was hired back to Porsche to run the engineering and motorsport side. And there the task was from Mr. Piech and Mr. Porsche at this time on the board, that you have to replace the 911 in the same sense like Volkswagen replaced the Beetle with the Golf. So do something like this, and this with my experience from BMW and all. And of course, this was a task I was actually very interested in. Starting with then, looking this and coming to the result that the 911 is the backbone of Porsche, and it deserves to have a longer life. And at this time, the 964 was something technologically like the end of the life product. It was very expensive, especially in the all-wheel, four-wheel drive version, and a lot of other things. So it was something which needed to be replaced. And I looked at this and came back at the end to the board and said, 911 is the backbone of the company. We make this car in the building cheaper and better, and showed them how it could look like, and everybody was fine from the board and happy with this. And the result was the Porsche 993, where I have the great luck to own the last ever built 993.
Oh wow!
as a reward, I could buy this. So this is how I think I saved the 911, because when I would have worked with 2,000 engineers for 2 years on a new product, there would have been no way to go back to the 911. And this is when I worked with Porsche around 18 years of my life. And if you ask me what have you done for Porsche, I said not much in these 18 years, but the 911 is still there. So
I raise it because it was a similar. I'm sort of painting a picture really of the different experiences that were in your armoury before you arrived at Aston Martin. It was a similar problem when you arrived at Aston Martin. You had a heritage model here that needed to be preserved but brought into the future. But there were other things as well. Of course, the BMW Z1 that you mentioned there. Modular in its construction, a discipline that you later brought to Aston Martin, of course, as well. But also, probably one of the biggest eyebrow raisers in your tenure at Aston Martin was probably the Signet. But I can understand how that came about because of your time at Daewoo. And you disrupted the market with the Matiz, didn't you, at that time?
Of course, the Daewoo side was also a big experience. And the big experience was, I must tell this story. I could work with Koreans who are pretty complicated to work with, but I could work very successful with the Koreans. And we were at some stage, Daewoo was number one in Korea. We were on buying Sangyong and Kia and so. Anyway, when I was asked, would you run Aston Martin? I thought, for me, if I could manage the Koreans, I will be able to manage the British, the English as well.
Wow.
So this was somehow a beginning which enabled me really to bring people together and to pull in the same string in the same direction and not different. So, but this doesn't answer the question to the signet. But as I am always a little bit forward thinking and not so much in the history. So originally, the history of Aston Martin is a mystique. You really can't define it exactly why you have so many people who are so keen to own an Aston Martin and be seen with an Aston Martin. This is a wonder, it's a mystique. But I was not so much looking back, I was more interested in the future, because I said, a history without a future is just history. And I came to Aston Martin when there was a history, but there was no future. So giving Aston Martin a future makes the history a heritage. And this is what we are here. This is why we have a heritage and Aston Martin Trust and so on. So now coming back to this signet, but of course, sports car and 12-cylinder cars and big cars, and it's great. I love this. But then you have a need to a smaller transportation. You have a city, you have to go to the bakery, you have to go shopping, you have to bring your kid to school or whatever. And I saw it in 2010, 11. It's now right 15 years ago. It's not appropriate in our society, in our mobility world, to have only these big cars. And this is why I came and said, okay, in a big ship, in a yard, we have the tender boats to harbor there. So let's have an Aston Martin, which is our tender to this, but has the same feeling in the interior, the quality, it has something really different to other of the small cars, because small cars normally were cheap. No, one was not cheap. And so we made this cooperation with Toyota, and of course one thing is very important. I wanted this car electric. In 2013, it should be electric. I mean, there was electric mobility, nothing there, but I thought for the city it would be right. We developed the Signet with an electric driveline together with Toyota. And when it was ready to start production, Toyota decided at this time, we do not make battery electric cars, which they are due today, but this was the death then of the future of a Signet. But yesterday evening, Greg, he has a wonderful one. I would have taken it immediately, but he was not prepared to sell it to me because it's such a wonderful car for the city. So this is the Signet.
And was this, I mentioned those numbers when we started, 50,000 cars produced during your 13 years as CEO, which was more than had been produced since 1913 up to 2000. Was getting Aston Martin from basically a cottage industry into a major brand was part of the strategy of achieving that then, creating Aston Martin that covered all parts of your motoring life, like the little city runabout, like the SUV that they now have? Was it about getting Aston Martin into more bits of the transport spectrum, if you like?
First is that a car brand in this competitive world needs to be profitable. To be profitable is very difficult on a very small number, not on 1,000 or 2,000 cars. So the business must be right and must be in line with then the emotional side of the business. And so I knew that we needed a variety of cars, that we need also those things which would make big money. And I knew at this time, and I knew this even from my Porsche past, where we in 1988 had an SUV on the drawing board, which is long before. And out of this was then made also the four-door car, the Rapide, because there are so many people, and I'm really glad that I meet some people with Rapid here who love this car as a traveling to Spain or other places with all their luggage, because it's a great feeling, it's a great comfort, and it's still an Aston Martin. And now, of course, in the other side of automotive world, you have SUVs. Not at this time, but it was clear if we would be able to make an SUV on a luxury base like a Signet with according one, we could make lots of money in Asia. And this is one of the things I have actually done. When I started in 2000. Aston Martin was known in England, maybe 90% of all people knew the brand. In Europe, it were maybe only 20% have an idea for Aston Martin. In America, maybe 5%, and in Asia, nobody knew about Aston Martin. So what was very much needed was to communicate the name, communicate the brand, and to get out and by this develop a market. So in principle, we didn't sell more cars in England, but we sold more car in America, we sold more car in Asia, and we built from 2000 to 2003, coming from 65 dealers to 140 dealers, and this in the world. So this was the concept behind this, and of course, this development was backed by Ford Motor Company because they have given me $300 million, so I could play with it.
Always helps when there's a bit of money in the bank. So that was the strategy that you employed. That was the awareness of Aston Martin when you took over, which, as you've mentioned, outside of the UK was basically zero. But functionally, amongst the staff, amongst the processes, amongst the factory, if you like, when you started on day one and you sort of sat down and looked around you, what was it like? And what did you think of Aston Martin when you arrived?
I stay with today, or start with today. We stayed from yesterday to night in the Roxton House Hotel in Roxton. This was the place where I stayed for my first day in my first 6 months when we were in Bloxham. I stayed in Roxton House. In Roxton, we drove around today. Roxton is a wonderful, nice city in the Midlands. It is, I think, it is as it is since hundreds of years. And this was my first impression. And the second, or even before this, Harry Carlton was the press officer at this time for Aston Martin. He picked me up in London from the then PHE office, and we walked up Berkeley Square, and he said to me, "Uli, I have a very difficult question and problem now. I have to tell my English customers that a German is going to lead Aston Martin." And I said, "Okay, Harry, this is why you are a press officer. You make this clear." And I must say, he made it very well, and I was very well received by the English press, by the motor press. I had never had any bad or negative comments about this. Of course, appreciating my motorsport, my other history, and basically they were all happy that I was not a finance guy coming from Ford. So back first day, office in Bloxham, in a kitchen bar, or in a kitchen from a barn, with a little bear sitting in the entrance. It's as Midland as it gets, and said, "Okay, it's a good start to make something out of this." And then comes, of course, Gaydon, which still is a very understated. I was not there recently, but it's still an understated place. It is a place which I think exactly hits Aston Martin values. It has had the gravel road. It has the sandstone. It has the form. It's not going loud and shouting. So it's something with a style. So this from the first day from the kitchen barn, and yeah.
I suppose you sort of inherited an Aston Martin that was still, even at the turn of the century, wheeling body shells across Tickford Road from the spray shop to the fitment and things like that. It was very different to how Aston Martins are made now, wasn't it? It was still very traditional, a cottage industry, as I mentioned earlier.
If I have said this from cottage to cool, most of you may know this. Walking around and seeing how the Aston Martins are built in Newport Pagnell, in Bloxham, and this was basically very charming. In what I could see there in the morning, I walk through the side of the hall, and the workers were sitting in the car with their breakfast boxes on the leather and all of those things, and I said, this doesn't work with what I expect as a quality work, and I understand that you have no other place where you could sit down. I will build you a cafeteria on the side, and there you can have your lunch and your breakfast and all of these things. Nice thing was that the workers said, we don't want this. And I said, okay, but nevertheless, you have to. And then they said, okay, we go on strike. So they went 2 weeks on strike. It didn't work, which was not such a big problem for me, because the number of cars at this early stage in 2001 were anyway not that much. So I said, okay, strike as long as you want, and then we see. After 2 weeks, this was fine, and we had the cafeteria built, and everybody was happy with this. So this was also a part of the beginning, and then I had something else from a quality point. I wanted the workers work with white overalls. And of course, if you work with a white overall in an environment, it's at 10 o'clock at breakfast, it's dirty. And this is what they, of course, told me. We don't want to see this as, okay, the only thing you can do, you can have to clean your workplace. You make your workplace so clean, and what you do, that you can wear a white overall. And this took about 5 years or 6 years until we could change to white overalls. But I think it's still great. And at the end, I know that people were very proud about the quality, what they have produced, and what you see around here from the paint, from the leather, from underneath, from everything. No screws and bolts for getting in the structure of the car, or so.
There'll be all sorts of owners now going back to their cars to see if they can find any egg stains or little bits of bacon in the back of their upholstery. Amazing story. I mean, you know, we have to remind ourselves DB7 was built of blocks from the old TWR factory that built XJ220 and others. You had Ford money that you were using to forward the company. It kind of felt, looking back in history now, a little bit disjointed from that sense. Is that how it felt at the time, that you were kind of not in your own plant, but there was that bit over there and Ford were over there, and was part of the drive to independence to bring that all back together?
Yeah, I have to agree to this. We had engines coming from Cosworth, which was owned by Audi at this time. We had engineering or the prototypes in the Jaguar building, and we had all this around, and so there was not I think a strong common ownership of the product and technology. And this was definitely something, and this was a time when in engineering and in marketing, a lot of companies were concentrating and make common developments. And this was a time when Jaguar and Ford were working on integrating Aston Martin into the Jaguar organization, have no more own development and have no more own status, be a department of Aston Martin. of Jaguar, which would have meant that Aston Martin would have disappeared. Because if you are just a department in a company, then you are like AMG or whatever. And that was a really hard fight for me to get Jack Nasser and Bill Ford convinced that the value of Aston Martin would disappear if it would be integrated into Jaguar. And so they agreed at the very end, and this allowed then afterwards to have their own engine blend. The engine blend, 8-cylinder and 12-cylinder, were built in our Aston Martin engine blend within the site of Ford Motor Company, of course, with this, but it was on our own site and so on. So we brought more the quality and the key business into the company, which enabled us at the very end to have Aston Martin here like this, like a brand and a value.
It's amazing to think, isn't it, that whilst they're neighbours now, they both share the same development facility, the racetrack that's just behind the British Motor Museum building here. At one point, there was serious talk that Aston Martin would be sold out of Jaguar dealerships, wasn't there? And there was all sorts of rumblings and rumours about that.
Yes.
It's surprising to think about it now.
It was also a part of this thing said, oh, you can be in the corner of Jaguar, you can be in the corner of Ford, and Aston Martin is not a corner company. Aston Martin is the priority. Aston Martin is where if you go in a dealership where you step up and a floor and where you don't go in the basement. And so, of course, we have multi dealerships where owners had Jaguar and BMW and others, but it was very clear that in this dealership development, Aston Martin had to have our own building, our own floor, our own entrance, have own identity, and so this is what we developed and what we could convince the dealers to invest in this corporate identity. Hard fight, because it's always a matter of cost. So if you think, okay, we have more places, but you don't want. We had it in Cologne. There was a dealer where you had Jaguar and then you had Aston Martin, but the big problem is then you walk in and you walk through the cheaper product and that's not nice. You need a special treatment. You need the ownership. It's like we are different. We have a value in the emotional part of this which is above the others. So this is.
Well, there's a reason why the baddies drive Jaguars and James Bond drives an Aston Martin, isn't there? Do you think then that it was essential that independence happened? And do you think without that independence out of the Ford group, Aston Martin wouldn't be here today, perhaps?
Yeah, I must really say, we were treated very well by Ford Motor Company. I have no complaints about how they treated me. I have had all the freedoms not to follow Ford rules. In example, we had a football world championship, and of course England playing somehow successful, and of course the workers in the midday they wanted to watch the game, and I have said, okay, we close the day for half a day, or the place for half a day. You can go and watch it. You work this hours later or the number of cars later here. Ford has said it is not possible. Worldwide, Ford Motor Companies do not allow workers to go home for watching it. So you can't do it. He said, okay, I don't care. I do this and let this do. So the result, and there were lots of other of those things. The result was, and I can say this, you get if you achieve in a business, if you achieve your targets, you get a bonus. And in Ford Motor Companies, is also you get a bonus if you achieve your targets. In this year, I didn't get the bonus because I didn't follow the Ford rules. But I was happy with it because I know I have done the right thing, and this was more reward than the money reward. And so, with all those smaller things, I thought we could be independent. Aston Martin has now the power, the performance, and this was in the time 2007, 2008, when we were high on the volume. The economy was great in the world, and we had all the wonderful dreams about the future. So, get out of Ford Motor Company, make a buyout, and because I thought this would be the right thing, and this is different from the understanding of public press that the small companies need the technology from the big companies. Technology is in the supplier industry. And even as a small company, you can get all the technologies you need from the suppliers. You don't need this from Audi, a Volkswagen, and Ford or others. It's sometimes easier, but in most cases even more expensive to do this. And to be dependent, and makes you less flexible. So, okay.
And I guess especially here, where there are so many high technology but very small companies in this part of the world, aren't there? That's why most of the Formula One grid is here.
Exactly. There is a lot, and even in this time, even a Bosch, a big supplier, has built smaller entities to supply small volumes because. At this time, the big OEMs also discovered that they make special editions, smaller volumes, have a higher price, and so this was a tendency in the automotive world to have smaller volumes and special volumes. So this was the base, and based on this, I had then a bank who underwrote me $1 billion check to go to Bill Ford in America and said, I want to buy the company.
Wow.
What he initially he accepted and said, we do this, it's great. But then because of the governance within Ford and others, they couldn't do this, they had to go in this auction. But in the auction, I could play a major part. I was allowed to play a major part, and this is why we had then at the very end a consortium coming in, and we are still there. The world has, of course, the automotive world has become more competitive, and maybe some of the rules I had established in the beginning has to modify, has to change now to address the different things. The difficulty today is that we do not have just 4 cylinders, 6 cylinders, 8 cylinders. We do have electric drives which have a completely different structure. But I personally think that competing technologies are very important. It cannot be that the government rules and says you have to make an electric car. It has to be in competition from the environment side, from all effects, with internal combustion engines. And when I could say we are driving in Austria a 500 Fiat electric to go. Instead of the Signet electric, the 500 Fiat electric, to make the small price. It's great. But sometimes we travel here to England. It's not electric. It is combustion engines. And the development in combustion engines today is so great that you could go 100 kilometers with a gasoline combustion engine with 5-6 liters per 100 kilometers. Mostly in France, in England, you have the speed limits anyway.
Is it then that the combustion bit of the engine isn't the problem, perhaps? It's just what comes out the back. And if we sort out the bit that comes out the back, combustion can be perfectly fine as a side technology to electric vehicles?
Yeah, of course it is what's coming out in the back, but considering where we come from 20, 30, 40 years ago, what's out of in the back, today what we could do to clean it up is not the end of the story. There is more to come. And imagine we do the same thing with water. With the spilled water, we clean it because we need it at the very end. So we clean it and then we can drink it again. And the same we do with the air. We have to clean it with the technology we do have. And then, of course, there are alternative fuels. I personally believe very much that hydrogen, which comes from energy in wind and solar, that this is an alternative driver in a combustion engine. And you will probably not know, you know, of course, that in 2013 I was driving on the Nürburgring 24-hour race, a hybrid hydrogen rapide. So we had a hydrogen tank there, we had the gasoline there, and when hydrogen was empty, the car changed to hydrogen. I am the only driver who had a zero emission qualification lap over 24 kilometers on the Nürburgring to prove that this is possible. But politics just said, okay, we don't want hydrogen, we don't want combustion engine. The combustion engine is bad. And now let me be a little bit more politically, if I have a chance to this thing. I also think that we are misled by Asia, by China, because China, and I said this for 25 years ago, wants to be number one in the industrial world and economy. And one of the major elements there is the car industry. One of the major elements is the car industry. And in the car industry, we in the Western world, in America, we have dominated this with our combustion engine. So what I'm going to do, I start with introducing a technology and developing like the electric cars, and then I force people who wants to sell a car in China that they have to sell also electric cars. And then you play the climate factor with not considering where the lithium and the ion and all this comes from, and then convince the politics that climate is very important. You have to make these changes. What happens? The change in the European and American industry to electric costs a huge amount of money. It's nearly going to kill it, and then Chinese industry will be number one in the world. So this is a very simple game there. China wants to be on top. What are they going to do? They are making cheap electric cars, make the politics to say it is the only technology you can use, and by this we are killing our industry. And and the next thing is, oh, thank you. And then we make even something worse. We say, okay, we make taxes on this Chinese car that they are no more they're cheap. It's wrong. We just must say combustion engines are still on the market or as a competitor, and then people will decide, and they will decide for the combustion engine, and some of them will decide to have an electric car. So it's basically to the European Union, but it's also England is also following in those things. And if I can talk for hours here. So, but in late 1990, I was tired from the automotive industry. I went to Flender. Flender in Germany is a company like David Brown's gearbox company, making big gearbox for ships and others. And I made at this time for windmills. Windmills have also the transmissions. And I made in 1999 a transmission for an offshore windmill with 5 megawatts to produce hydrogen. because then the hydrogen could be transported, whatever, in store. So even 25 years ago, I was thinking about those things and about those technologies. And England has a lot of possibilities with producing by wind and by solar, but mostly it produces the electric power when it's not needed. So you have to store it, and storage is not possible. So you make hydrogen, and then you drive the hydrogen. So really, I appreciate that you applauded when he said this has to be their alternative technology. It has to let the market. And we cannot. To China, I must say, we have no chance in competing with them with price, because China has 1.3 billion people to compare to the 300 million we have here. So they have a huge market. They can make all their profit there. They can do everything what they want and make the prices. They can make us.
And the workforce don't go on strike if you ask them not to eat their breakfast in the cars either, do they?
Yeah, so, okay, stop with this politics side.
Well, it's an important point, because I was going to ask you about the future of Aston Martin, and of course you have touched on it there. The big challenge in the world that you've just described is how brands like Aston Martin, that stand for freedom, that stand for driving experience, can differentiate themselves in a world that is increasingly controlled both in the freedoms that you have to drive and enjoy motor vehicles, but also in the technologies that you're allowed to use to propel them. There is hope, of course, because in 2026 we'll see the hydrogen combustion engine class at Le Mans for the 24-hour race. They're introducing that, which is excellent news. So they're obviously thinking along the same lines as you are. But as you look back and as you look forward, to round this off, what would you hope that your legacy has been on the Aston Martin brand, and what would you hope to see it do in the future?
That's a difficult question. It's a difficult question because I am no more in Aston Martin since 2015. And even if I still consider Aston Martin as my company, being the longest lasting chairman and all this stuff here. But of course, there's always a break. If you go out, you are no more there in the seat. You get a little bit of a distance. So it's actually I was really considering to come here, because it's somewhere in my heart to come to Gaydon and not to go in the place and not see this and just have Aston Martin here. But it's a challenge. So what Aston Martin, what we have tried in these 15 years is to give Aston Martin a character, give Aston Martin a different details from other companies. And of course you are copied, it's followed. And what I see today is that characters we did have, like the emotion control unit, like the buttons P, R, and D, like the front bumper, the front side. Now it's a clamshell which has a bumper. Like everybody since 50 years has bumpers. Now we have bumpers, and I think these are things which has in some ways come back. Where can Aston Martin be different from a Ferrari, from a Lamborghini, from BMW, from whomever is out there, from the Chinese, from the copy, look, from the Teslas. This is something where I would go very much in this differentiation. It's not the big thing. It's not the big thing. It's very often the smaller things which makes this character. And so this is what I would do. And then, as I would recommend to Volkswagen, to Porsche, to Ford, reduce cost. In the last 10 years, costs have exploded. There things are done unnecessary. And when you come back with V8 Vantage, with V12 Vantage, with DB9, DBS, Rapid, they have all the same underneath. They have the same windscreen. They have the same center part with steering, with air conditioning, and all of those things. They are in crash worthiness and a lot of things. They're just identical. So this reduces the cost, reduces the test. And what are we doing today? We make all difference. Because you have the wonderful designers. I think Ian Callum is coming later also to this thing. I have made on the base of DB7 the Aston 2020 with Giugiaro, which was a DB7, 100% DB7, but you could not see that this was a DB7, not in the windscreen, not anywhere. And with this, I proved that I am right if I'm saying it's not so much this underneath and some dimension to make a different car. And designers like an Ian Callum, Marek Reichmann, or whom name this, they tend always, I need this 5 millimeters here, I need the 5 millimeters here. The engineers and the English engineers are very good in this. Everybody is a great engineer and has a different idea and different thing and make this different and make this new and it's a little bit better. You can't allow this. This is then this spread of ingenuity which costs huge money and does not give any differentiation any better. So there, I think there should be a chance to get a financial base also to Aston Martin in the future.
Well, from looking from the outside as a fan of Aston Martin, Dr. Ulrich's period in office, if you want to call it that, was a period of time where Aston Martin changed and changed for the better. It became a brand that we saw everywhere. It became a brand that people aspired to once again. It became a brand that I spent a lot of time reporting on at the 24 Hours of Le Mans. It was great to see those ProDrive prepared cars out on the grid and taking Aston Martin back into motorsport properly once again. All of those things happened under the tenure of Dr. Ulrich here. And of course, those numbers speak for themselves, don't they? 50,000 cars built, 20 new models, more than had ever been seen between 1913 and 2000. Those numbers, though, achieved in just 13 years from 2000 to 2013. A wonderful achievement, a wonderful man, and great to see people in charge of car companies that are car fans for a change.
You're just finishing our speech, but something we have not touched is the motorsport, is the racing.
Because you are a racing driver through and through, aren't you, of course?
So I always wanted a Formula One because Ferrari has a big benefit from being in the Formula One since day one. Every 2 weeks they are in the newspaper. But Formula One costs huge money. I have never the money. So I said, if somebody comes in and gives me at this time for guaranteed over 5 years, every year 500 million, we can go in Formula One, we can do something there. It might be even a little bit more, but this was why Formula One was not away. But racing our production cars, this is something which can be achieved, and there are lots of motorsport events and races in the world. And this is when we started in 2006 with the initiative from my engineers, from a Chris Porritt, in example, coming to me and said, Uli, we want to build a V Advantage for endurance races and for Le Mans. I said, we have no money for this. And he said, that's not a problem. We come on Saturday and Sundays and we prepare the car. By the way, you could also be a driver there. Okay, it was big teasing, and so we built the V Advantage Rose at this time, which first raced in 2006, and we had a very successful development until one of my successors came and stopped everything of this road racing, sold the car, sold all and now I think it's rebuilding at the moment, and this is something what I think is very
next year, which is exciting, isn't it, to see hypercar start next year?
This is very, very important that these cars show that they are competent and can be transferred to race cars, and basically everybody who has a talent can race Aston Martin. It's a big, important aspect. Sorry.
Ladies and gentlemen, what a brilliant 3/4 of an hour that was. Supposed to be half an hour. I enjoyed it. We wanted to carry on, didn't we? Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Ulrich Betts.
Thank you very much.
growing the passion, sharing the stories. The Aston Martin Heritage Podcast.
Wasn't that excellent? And I hope you very much enjoyed it, as I know the festival goers did. The next few podcasts will feature more interviews from key AML personnel, so keep an eye out for them. Of course, if you don't want to miss them, all you have to do is to subscribe, and you won't miss out. And also, please do not forget to rate these podcasts, as it really does help us. So, until next time, thanks for listening.
Discover more about the story of Aston Martin, the cars, the people, the history with the Aston Martin Heritage Trust. You're always welcome to visit us at our museum in Oxfordshire, so find out more via amht.org.uk.